Now, there's been reports that the African National Congress is considering cutting ties with the economic freedom fighters. The two parties entered into agreements at various municipalities, including major metros in Gauteng. We're joined now by Sinawo Tambo, EFF spokesperson, to tell us and respond to this. Sinawo, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you and greetings to your viewers.
All right, let's go straight to it. I mean, your first initial reflection on the story at hand, that the ANC is saying that maybe this marriage, this partnership is not working and they want to cut ties.
We're not surprised. It's been predecessed by an irrational Secretary General of the ANC called Fikile Mbalula going around promoting the narrative that they shouldn't work with us. It's been predicated by a regional chair in Ekurhuleni, writing a letter to Fikile Mbalula saying that they are being squeezed out of the space in Ekurhuleni because we are not only performing well in terms of government, but we are preventing them from massive looting sprees that they had become accustomed to in previous years in that city. So that is one of the primary motivations as to why they want to remove the EFF. First and foremost, they say this in their report to the NEC, which was presented by a person who calls himself the head of the political school called David Makura, that the EFF is eating at the voter base of the ANC. We're utilizing the power that has been given to us as members of mayoral committees to deliver services to our people, and this is allowing us to prove that we have a track record of governance ahead of the 2024 elections. So that is what is motivating the discussions within the ANC to cut off the agreements that we have in multiple municipalities. It's that they would rather our people do not have services because those services are being provided by the EFF, and this means they may lose power in 2024, power which they've had, by the way, for 30 years, and they've been unable to do what the EFF has been able to do in a couple of months in 2023.
But when you look back at the initial agreements that you've had going into these coalitions, does that not affect your plans initially as the EFF to go into this partnership?
Look, there's no formal coalition agreement with the ANC, by the way. The MMCs of the EFF have been appointed by Al-Jamaa in the city of Johannesburg, for example. So we're not appointed by the African National Congress. There's no written down coalition agreement as to, in terms of agreement and operation. Our only interest has been service delivery in all of these municipalities, and we've done that. In Ekurhuleni, we've stabilized the finances through the MMC. Ngulego Dunga was also the chair of the province, and may he have a speedy recovery after his recent accident. We've been able to ensure that safety is visible and active, and people can see that there's an MMC of public safety in the city of Johannesburg. In Mogale City, we've been able to repair those roads which needed to be tarred and were full of potholes. In Nelson Mandela Bay, we have removed one of the most corrupt city managers by the name of Noxolo Mas, who had captured that council and compromised that institution in terms of having defrauded it. And yet I was allowed to preside over it while she was out on bail, while she was out on trial. It's the EFF that led a motion leading to her removal. And we're going to, of course, be zooming into the current allegations around the acting city manager who's been appointed, who's a COO, who apparently was appointed irregularly by her and is possibly her proxy. So we have been able to deliver services. We've been able to uproot corruption. And we're going to be very proud to deliver that message to our people, whether we're removed or not. We're not scared of being removed as MMCs. We're not in it for power. We're in it to deliver services. And the fact that the NEC of the ANC discusses the fact that we're delivering services, meaning that we are a threat to them in 2024, means we have done well.
And that's what I wanted to touch on, in that the criticism that you have. I mean, in politics, any other party will criticize the other, as I'm sure as the EFF, we will criticize your opposition, in brackets, will be the DA or the ANC or whoever in this regard. Do you feel that it's warranted in that there is a threat leading up to the elections? Is it purely electioneering that the ANC feels this way about the EFF?
Yeah, it's petty electioneering. It's electioneering at the expense of service delivery. Because if the ANC could say to us the EFF is corrupt, the EFF has stolen money here, the EFF has been unable to conduct itself appropriately and deliver services to the people, then there would be a valid discussion to have. But they are not saying that even in their own discussion document that they are having about cutting ties with the EFF in municipalities. They are saying we're eating at their voter base because we're delivering services. They are saying we're utilizing the positions we have to prove that we have a good track record of governance, which is a track record of delivering services. So that is their motivation. So for them to be motivated by the fact that they must remove us, even though it may mean services are not going to be delivered to the people, means that it's an anti-people decision, it is a populist decision, it's an opportunist decision, and it is one that is based on political maneuvering over and above the interest of our people. And our people must know this, that the ANC wants to remove the EFF because the EFF is delivering services. and they're scared they're going to lose in 2024.
You speak about eating into their numbers in terms of voters. I mean, is it something that you have seen growing significantly? I know that the EFF has been quite strong in terms of raising the issues of voter registration building up to 2024. Is it something that you have experienced that is tangible, that you are actually eating into their numbers, as it were?
Absolutely. We've won by-elections in Mpumalanga most recently, eating away in their voter bases in Nkomazi and Msugalikwa, where they are traditionally strong. So they can see this. They can see that we are on a constant upward trajectory in terms of by-elections across the country. They can see that our people are resonating with our message for voter registration, particularly the youth, where we can see in the campuses of universities and TVET colleges, the EFF Students Command is registering remarkable victories. And those are the people that we are registering to vote. And those people are going to be a new voter base in the 2024 elections that will possibly unseat the ANC. So there's tangible evidence that we're going to take over, and that is alarming them.
There's also a big question when you look at this cutting ties. I mean, they're also talking about cutting ties with the PA also in that regard. Does this, from your perspective as the EFF, somehow talk to you about how coalitions should be handled in the future?
Look, I don't think coalitions should be based on the fact that your opposition is outperforming you and therefore that coalition must be broken. That is disingenuous, because we should all be in either coalition agreements or working relationships on the basis of delivering services to our people. And if now you're going to have a political jealousy because your opposition is performing better than you, no one is stopping the MMCs of the ANC in Ekurhuleni from delivering services with respect to the portfolios they have. They just have no imagination to do so. They have no capacity to do so. And when they look at the EFF, now they want to villainize the fact that we can deliver services and utilize positions of power in the interest of the people. They want to make us look bad for that because they don't have the same capacity, they don't have the same imagination. Their only participation in governance for the last 30 years has been theft. And now because we're not stealing with them, we have to be removed.
So in terms of coalition, is it something that you're open to going forward, looking at 2024?
Look, we're aiming for total victory. There's nothing in the road to victory plan of the EFF that speaks about coalitions. The word coalition is not part and parcel of the plan of the EFF going into 2024. So those things we'll explore after the election results, but our aim is to win. Coalition discussions for the future, we don't imagine ourselves losing. We don't go around constituting coalitions before an election in order to have some pact, because we know we're not going to win. So the EFF remains the only credible threat to the African National Congress because the Democratic Alliance has conceded defeat because it's consolidating a coalition before the elections even come. We're going for an outright victory. This doesn't mean our door is closed to conversation, but we're going for a victory.
And I mean, that is my point in that is it something that you will be open to if and when that should happen into coalitions, if your aim of an outright majority will happen? I mean, would it something that you consider going into bed, as it were, with the ANC, or you'll cross the bridge when you get there?
Coalitions are complex, and you don't make coalitions with friends only. You make coalitions and peace agreements even with the enemy. So we must be awake to that reality, and so should all of society.
Another issue, Sinawo, has always been the issue of just looking at other, with all due respect, smaller parties and the role that they play. In this regard, what role do you think they have played, and also in just ensuring service delivery or lack thereof?
Look, they're part and parcel of the democratic process. We don't go around insulting people because of the number of votes they have. They are part of the council. Even if you have one seat, you are part and parcel of the democratic outcomes of a vote in South Africa. And that voter, or even that constituency that elected you there, must be respected, and your contribution doesn't mean any less simply because you got less votes as a political party. So we operate on that merit, and they've played their role, whether positive or negative, and it's up to the voters to decide moving forward.
Do you have friends as the EFF that you might want to have conversations with as yet, or like you said earlier on, you stand on your own and believe that you're strong enough?
Our only friend is the people of South Africa, the people of the continent, the needy, the poor, the dispossessed, the dejected and forgotten people of this country. Those are our friends. Anyone else will see to finish at the time.
Let's move on now and talk about NSAS. I mean, there's been a lot of concern about that. I mean, just at face value, what's your take as the EFF with the recent developments with NSAS?
Look, I think there's a tendency in South Africa to allow ourselves to be given a target and to allow people to escape accountability because that target has been provided to us. So we've seen that the CEO has been removed there. But we need to reflect as South Africa as to what the responsibility of the collective at NSFAS is in terms of what has happened there. We know that now, in the 11th of August, the NSFAS board and Plains Mande, the minister, endorsed the procurement of 4 service providers. They said that the bids were fair, they were transparent, they welcomed the direct payment systems, they were in support of the board, they were in support of the entire plan. But now they've gone mute, they've gone silent. Only one individual has been targeted for that. And we think it's irrational to think that the CEO of NSFAS could operate in isolation and be able to implement such a process without anyone else being involved. So we think that there must be collective responsibility taken. There must be collective responsibility taken by everyone in that institution, from the board chairperson to the minister, Plains Mande. That board chairperson, in fact, we must also be able to raise questions on him. He was in some empowerment economic advisory board or something of that nature in Mpumalanga. He was removed there for bribery of almost 1 million rand. He was removed there for contravening the Organized Crime Act. No one is raising questions about that. So we must be able to reflect as to what has been the process. What is the collective input? Is it negligence from the board and the ministry for them to have allowed this to happen under their supervision? Or what were they endorsing this entire time for them to now allow only one individual to fall? So we want a collective responsibility to be taken. We want everyone to account. We want the minister to account. We want the board chairperson to account. We want the entire board to account. And we want heads to roll. So we think South African people must not think that now one individual is removed. Everything is quiet at NSFAS. NSFAS is in a state of collapse. There's fictitious students that are being paid through a system. So if, for example, you apply to an institution and you apply to NSFAS and your application is not successful, your data is still kept and you're given a fund disbursement, and that money gets redirected to some syndicate that is operating in there. So there's a deep-seated rot in that institution that needs to be challenged.
But why has that failed, Sinawo? Because this is not a new problem with NSFAS. I mean, it goes as far back as when I was a student 101 years ago. You know? And it's been there. It comes and goes, but the issue of just management and the rot within NSFAS always rears its ugly head. But we never seem to get it right. Where do you think the problem is?
The African National Congress is the problem. The African National Congress is why all institutions in this country are collapsing. And there needs to be accountability in terms of the oversight role and direction being provided by ministers in South Africa. The ministers of South Africa are so easily scapegoat executives in all institutions, at SAA, at ESCOM, at Transnet. It's always executives or leaders of boards whose heads are falling. But these ministers keep on either being reshuffled and taken elsewhere or maintain their jobs and have culpable plausibility or deniability, rather, to any rot or corruption that occurs there. So we need to move away from this culture of allowing individuals to be scapegoated for collective decisions and collective actions. Let us go back into history. What has been the role of the board? What has been the role of the chairperson of the board? What has been the role of Minister Plains Mande? And what has happened at NSFAS and what we're seeing there? They endorsed and supported the appointment of 4 service providers that they are now distancing themselves from. Those people didn't appoint themselves. They were appointed under the instruction of principals who are the principals of the CEO of NSFAS. We want the heads of those who are the heads of these departments and institutions. And Mr. Plains Mande should not be allowed to get away with what is happening at NSFAS today. He's constantly surviving this collapse of the higher education sector by being able to identify people to scapegoat for the decisions that are taken under his instruction. Let's point the finger at him and let's get rid of him as an enemy of the youth of this country and students.
How then do you challenge that as the EFF? I mean, is it just by talking about it, coming on Newzroom Afrika and saying that the minister must go, or is there a plan to make sure that these things are addressed adequately and the solutions are found?
Look, the President of the Student Command was here on this platform yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, and he has articulated that they'll be opening a case against the entirety of NSFAS as an institution and, of course, individuals within that institution as well who are of higher rank. I think that's a good step that has been taken by our student movement. That has, of course, raised the alarm on irregularities that are occurring at NSFAS for a very long time, and those alarms were falling on deaf ears. So we're going to allow our student movement to lead that process. We think they've got a competent and coherent strategy in terms of what needs to happen. But we must be able to emphasize collective responsibility. We must be able to condemn people scapegoating. We must be able to ensure that supervisors, people who give instructions, get removed. And we must be able to ensure that South Africa no longer allows political appointees who are ministers to constantly shift and change the executive authorities of institutions in this country while they remain in the same positions when they also are involved in massive scale corruption.
There's always a finger pointed at politicians and media alike, you and I alike, in saying that if you listen to the conversation we just had now for the last 4 or 5 minutes about the NSAS, we hardly have spoken about students, the real people that actually benefit or not out of this issue. How should we address that in making sure that then we find the solutions? I mean, now we're talking about matriculants that are starting to write. We know the issues that will happen in February, January, when the students are going to higher education, the strikes, the lack of funding, the lack of spaces and all those things. And on top of that, there's still these issues with the NSFAS. At what point should we then start having those conversations that affect the real people that benefit from NSFAS?
Look, those conversations are occurring, and I think we must applaud the students of South Africa because they never fail to stand up for themselves. I've been part of a generation that fought against Blades Monday, and it pains me, and it pains a lot of us who have been part and parcel of struggles for free education in South Africa, that there's the same individual who's a common denominator, common factor in all crises confronting students. Blades Monday was there when students were demanding free education. He arrested them, got them suspended, some got killed. Blades Monday is there when there's irregularities in appointments of service providers, yet he still escapes culpability. Blades Monday is there when fictitious students are being paid at NSFAS and there's a syndicate that is orchestrating the false payment of monies to non-existent students. He still escapes accountability. So we need the students of South Africa to stand up and fight against the African National Congress that is destroying the institutions of this country in all of their facets and defrauding students, defrauding people who are supposed to be the intelligentsia and future of this country, future engineers, future doctors, future social workers. The future of this nation lies in those people who are trying to pursue education. And they are discouraging them because they make education seem like an activity of the poor. People who will never succeed. When they get there, they won't have a place to sleep, they won't have food to eat. If they were lucky enough to graduate, they won't have a job. That's what the ANC is doing to education in South Africa. They are making it something that is not desirable. They are making the youth of this country look up to criminals. They are making the youth of this country become substance abusers and drug abusers because they make education such a difficult thing to experience. And we need to fight against this.
So now, very briefly, we are out of time. But what role then do you think that institutions of higher learning particularly should be playing in this regard with this whole issue of NSFAS? Because they have a role to play one way or the other. Very briefly, if you may.
No, look, the institutions of South Africa should also take responsibility for how they've been able to manage the disbursement of funds in South Africa as well. They're having some tug of war over being a service provider or dispersing money rather than prioritizing the fact that students need to be serviced. They sit with exorbitant amounts of money that have been deposited to them while they know that they don't have the prerequisite number of students who should receive those monies. Only when they are pressurized or there's a potential of them being exposed do they return that money to NSFAS. So institutions of South Africa need to learn integrity. They need to have thorough systems of verifying whether students are on their records or not, and those records must be correspondent to the records of NSFAS, to the records of SASA, to the records of Home Affairs. So our institutions need to play their role in ensuring that fraud doesn't occur in our institutions of higher learning, but also they don't become part and parcel of wars and bidding wars to be service providers as well.
So now, thank you so much for coming in to speak to us. I appreciate your time.